on a humid morning in late August 1979, in a small town nestled in the red clay hills of northeast Georgia. A young woman named Patricia Ann Holloway walked out of her modest ranch house on Pinecrest Road, climbed into her powder blue Chevrolet Impala, and drove away from everything she knew. She was 28 years old. She had honey-colored hair that fell past her shoulders and a quiet smile that appeared in photographs but rarely in person anymore. She told no one where she was going. She left behind her husband of 7 years, a man named Dennis Holloway, who worked the third shift at the textile mill. She left behind her 5-year-old daughter, Emily, and her 3-year-old son, Christopher. And she left behind a question that would echo through the community for more than 4 decades. Where was Patricia Ann Holloway going that morning, and why did she never come back? The town of Glenridge sat 40 miles northwest of Athens, population barely 3,000 souls. The kind of place where everybody knew your family going back 3 generations, and your business before you knew it yourself. The main street stretched 6 blocks, lined with brick storefronts that had weathered 100 Georgia summers. A single traffic light hung over the intersection of Main and Oakwood. Beyond the town center, the landscape rolled in gentle waves of pine forest and farmland, cut through by narrow roads that turned to red dust in the dry months and slick mud when the rains came. The Holloway family lived on the eastern edge of town, where Pinecrest Road dead-ended into a wall of loblolly pines. Their house was a modest ranch built in 1965, white aluminum siding with black shutters, a carport on the left side, and a small front yard that Dennis kept neatly mowed. Patricia had planted azalea bushes along the foundation the spring after they moved in. By 1979, those bushes had grown tall and unruly, blooming bright pink each April, then fading to dark green through the summer months. Dennis Holloway was 31 years old that August, a lean man with dark hair and a mustache that curved down past the corners of his mouth. He had worked at Seiko Textiles since graduating high school, starting on the floor and working his way up to shift supervisor. He drove a brown Ford pickup truck with a dent in the rear fender. People who worked with him described him as quiet, dependable, the type who showed up early and stayed late without complaint. He coached the church softball team on weekends. He drank beer with the other men after games, standing in small circles in the gravel parking lot while moths circled the overhead lights. Patricia had grown up in Glenridge, the younger of 2 daughters born to a Methodist preacher and his wife. She had been homecoming queen her senior year at Glenridge High, though those who knew her then said she seemed uncomfortable with the attention, always looking down when people congratulated her. She married Dennis 3 months after graduation. Emily was born 11 months later. Christopher came 2 years after that. Patricia stayed home with the children. She kept a vegetable garden in the backyard. She sang in the church choir on Sundays, standing in the back row, her voice blending into the others so you could never quite pick it out. The morning of August 23, 1979, began like most mornings that summer. The sun rose at 6:47, already warm, promising another day where the temperature would climb into the mid-90s by afternoon. Dennis had worked the overnight shift and arrived home just after 7 in the morning. His truck pulled into the carport. The engine ticked as it cooled. He went inside through the side door, still wearing his work boots, tracking red Georgia clay across the linoleum floor in the kitchen. Patricia was at the stove, scrambling eggs in a cast-iron skillet. The children sat at the small wooden table near the window. Emily wore a yellow sundress with white flowers. Christopher had on shorts and a striped shirt, one sock on, one sock off. The radio on the counter played country music, the volume turned low. The coffee maker burbled and hissed. What happened in the next 30 minutes would be reconstructed later from various accounts, pieced together like a puzzle with missing edges. Dennis said he ate breakfast standing up at the counter. He said Patricia seemed normal, maybe a little quiet, but she was often quiet in the mornings. He said the children finished eating and went outside to play in the backyard. He said he took a shower, then lay down in the bedroom with the curtains drawn and the window unit rattling cool air into the dim space. At some point between 8 and 8:30 that morning, Patricia Holloway walked out of her house. She was wearing a blue cotton dress and white sandals. She carried her brown leather purse over one shoulder. She got into the powder blue Impala parked in the driveway. The engine started. The tires crunched over the gravel, and she drove away. Dennis said he was asleep and did not hear the car leave. He said he woke around noon and found the house empty. The children's toys were scattered in the backyard. The swing set stood motionless in the still air. A red plastic truck lay on its side near the back steps. The back door stood open, the screen door propped against the frame with a brick. Dennis said he called Patricia's parents first. They had not seen her. He called her sister. She had not heard from Patricia in 3 days. He called the neighbors on both sides. No one had seen anything. Then, at 1:15 in the afternoon, Dennis Holloway called the Glenridge Police Department and reported his wife missing. By 2 o'clock, a patrol car sat in the Holloway driveway. Officer Raymond Burke walked through the house, making notes in a small spiral notebook. The breakfast dishes still sat in the sink. The coffee pot was half full, the coffee gone cold. Patricia's wedding ring lay on the bathroom counter next to the sink. Her toothbrush was gone. So was a small overnight bag she kept on the top shelf of the bedroom closet. The children were found at 3:30 that afternoon. A woman named Margaret Kinsey, who lived on a farm 2 miles outside town, called the police station to report 2 small children walking alone on County Road 18. A deputy drove out and found Emily and Christopher standing beside a barbed wire fence, both crying, both covered in red dust. Emily's yellow dress was torn at the hem. Christopher had lost both socks and one shoe. When the deputy asked where their mother was, Emily said, "Mommy told us to wait in the car." The search began in earnest that evening. 20 volunteers gathered at the Glenridge Community Center just before sundown. Sheriff William Tate, a heavy-set man with gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses, spread a county map across a folding table. He divided the volunteers into teams. Some would search the roads leading out of town. Others would check the woods near where the children had been found. A third group would knock on doors, asking if anyone had seen the blue Impala that morning. The temperature had dropped to 85 degrees by the time darkness fell. Flashlight beams cut through the pine trees along County Road 18. Voices called Patricia's name into the night. The search continued until midnight, then resumed at dawn the next morning. Bloodhounds were brought in from the state police barracks in Athens. The dogs picked up a scent near the spot where the children had been found, followed it east along the roadside for half a mile, then lost it where the asphalt met a wider highway. Patricia's car was found on August 25th, 2 days after she vanished. A county maintenance worker spotted it in a turnout along Highway 41, 15 miles south of Glenridge. The powder blue Impala sat facing the road, keys still in the ignition, driver's door unlocked. Patricia's purse was on the front seat. Her wallet was inside, containing $43 in cash and her driver's license. The overnight bag was in the trunk, still packed with clothes that had been neatly folded. But Patricia Ann Holloway was nowhere to be found. Part 2. The investigation, the search operation, expanded across 3 counties. State police coordinated with local departments. Helicopters flew grid patterns over the forests and fields. Dive teams checked every pond, creek, and reservoir within a 20-mile radius. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation sent 2 agents to Glenridge. They set up in a back office at the police station, covering the walls with maps and photographs, building timelines on yellow legal pads. The community response was immediate and overwhelming. More than 100 volunteers showed up each morning, gathering in the parking lot behind the Methodist church. They walked in lines through cornfields and tobacco patches, shoulder to shoulder, eyes on the ground. The local newspaper, the Glenridge Gazette, ran Patricia's photograph on the front page every day for a week. Television crews from Atlanta drove up to film reports, their vans parked on Main Street, reporters doing stand-ups with the town square visible behind them. Tips poured in. A woman in the next county reported seeing someone matching Patricia's description at a gas station. The lead went nowhere. A man called to say he had given a ride to a woman in a blue dress on Highway 41. Police tracked him down, but his story fell apart under questioning. Another caller claimed to have seen Patricia getting into a green pickup truck with an out-of-state license plate. Investigators followed up. Nothing came of it. Those who knew Dennis Holloway said he seemed cooperative but strangely calm. He answered every question the police asked. He agreed to multiple interviews. He took a polygraph examination on August 27th. The results were inconclusive. When asked about his marriage, Dennis said things had been fine. When asked if Patricia had seemed unhappy, he said no more than usual. When asked if she had any reason to leave, he paused for a long moment, then said he could not think of any. But small inconsistencies began to emerge, details that did not quite align. Dennis had told Officer Burke that he woke at noon and found the house empty. But a neighbor named Thomas Garrett, who lived across the street, said he saw Dennis outside around 10:30 that morning, standing in the driveway, looking up and down Pinecrest Road. When investigators asked Dennis about this, he said he might have gotten up briefly to use the bathroom, might have stepped outside for a moment, could not remember exactly. The timeline became more problematic the closer investigators looked. Dennis said Patricia left while he was sleeping. But the children had been found 2 miles outside town at 3:30 in the afternoon. If Patricia had dropped them off that morning, as Emily's statement suggested, why had no one seen them for hours? The stretch of County Road 18 where they were found was rural, but not isolated. Cars passed by regularly. Someone should have noticed 2 small children walking alone. Physical evidence was sparse and contradictory. Forensic technicians processed the Impala from top to bottom. They found Patricia's fingerprints throughout the interior, which was expected. They found Dennis's fingerprints on the steering wheel, door handles, and Clear's mirror, which he explained by saying he often drove the car. They found no signs of struggle, no blood, no foreign hair or fibers that could not be accounted for. The gas tank was 3/4 full. The odometer showed the car had been driven approximately 38 miles since its last fill-up, which Dennis said had occurred 2 days before Patricia disappeared. Investigators mapped out distances. From the Holloway house to the spot where the children were found was 2.3 miles. From there to where the Impala was discovered was an additional 18 miles. The total distance did not match the odometer reading. Either Patricia had driven somewhere else first, or someone else had driven the car after dropping off the children. Or Dennis Holloway's memory of when the car had last been filled with gas was wrong. Deputies whispered quietly among themselves in the station house. They noted that Dennis had not cried during any of the interviews. They noted that he had gone back to work at the textile mill 3 days after Patricia vanished, maintaining his regular schedule. They noted that when asked about his wife, he spoke in the past tense before catching himself and switching to present tense. Patricia is a good mother, he had said during one interview, the correction hanging in the air like smoke. The GBI agents interviewed Dennis multiple times. They asked about his relationship with Patricia. He said they had their disagreements like any married couple, but nothing serious. They asked if he had ever struck her. He said no, never. They asked if Patricia had any close friends she might have confided in. Dennis named 2 women from the church choir. The agents interviewed both. One said Patricia had seemed withdrawn in recent months, but nothing more specific. The other said Patricia had mentioned feeling trapped sometimes, but many young mothers felt that way. They asked Dennis about the morning Patricia disappeared. "Walk us through it again," they said. "Every detail, every movement." Dennis repeated his story. It varied slightly each time, small details shifting. Once he said he ate toast with his eggs. Another time he said he only had eggs. Once he said Christopher was wearing his blue striped shirt. Another time he said it was the red one. The agents made notes of every variation. They asked Dennis about the children being found on County Road 18. He said he had no idea how they got there. They asked if Patricia might have dropped them off and told them to wait while she ran an errand. Dennis said that did not sound like something Patricia would do. They asked if he had driven out that way himself. Dennis said no, he had been home asleep until noon, then had stayed at the house waiting for Patricia to return. But the neighbor, Thomas Garrett, now said he was certain he saw Dennis's brown Ford pickup truck heading east on Pinecrest Road around 11 that morning. The truck had turned onto County Road 18. Garrett was sure of the time because he had been working on his own truck in the driveway, and he had checked his watch before going inside for lunch. 11:05, he told the investigators, maybe 11:10 at the latest. When confronted with this new information, Dennis Holloway changed his story. He admitted he had driven out to look for Patricia himself that morning, before calling the police. He said he panicked when he woke and found everyone gone. He said he drove around for an hour checking places Patricia might have gone: the grocery store, her parents' house, the park where she sometimes took the children. He said he found nothing and came home, which was when he decided to call the authorities. The agents asked why he had not mentioned this before. Dennis said he did not think it mattered. He said he was confused, stressed, not thinking clearly. The agents asked where exactly he had driven. Dennis described a route that took him through town and out toward the Methodist church. The agents pointed out that County Road 18 was not on that route. Dennis said he might have driven out that way too. He could not remember exactly. It was all a blur. A volunteer searcher found something on September 1st, 9 days after Patricia vanished. The man was checking a wooded area near Highway 41, about a mile north of where the Impala had been discovered. He saw something white among the pine needles and underbrush. He walked closer. It was a woman's sandal, white leather, the left one. There was dirt on it, but no blood, no obvious damage. The searcher marked the location and called for investigators. The sandal was photographed, bagged, tagged, and taken to the GBI crime lab in Atlanta. Dennis Holloway confirmed it belonged to Patricia. He said he was certain because he had bought her those sandals for her birthday in June. Investigators searched the surrounding area thoroughly. They found no matching right sandal. They found no other clothing. They found no sign of Patricia Holloway. The search continued through September, but the numbers dwindled. 50 volunteers became 30, then 20, then 10. The helicopters stopped flying. The dive teams packed up their equipment. The reporters went back to Atlanta. By October, only a handful of dedicated searchers still went out on weekends, walking the same roads and trails they had already walked a dozen times, finding nothing new. The case went cold. The investigation did not officially close, but it slowed to a crawl. The GBI agents returned to other assignments. The file on Patricia Holloway grew thick with reports and witness statements and dead-end leads, then sat in a metal cabinet in the Glenridge Police Department, gathering dust. Dennis Holloway hired a lawyer in November. The lawyer held a press conference and said his client was being unfairly targeted by investigators who had no evidence of wrongdoing. Dennis stood beside the lawyer, looking directly at the cameras, and said he just wanted his wife to come home. He said he loved Patricia and missed her every day. He said whoever knew what happened to her should come forward. His voice broke slightly when he mentioned the children, Emily and Christopher, who asked about their mother constantly and did not understand why she was gone. But those who watched closely noticed Dennis's eyes. They were dry. And when the cameras stopped rolling, his expression settled back into something neutral, almost blank. As if he had flipped a switch inside himself and turned off whatever emotion had been briefly visible. Part 3. The silence 6 months after Patricia vanished. Dennis Holloway sold the house on Pinecrest Road and moved with the children to an apartment complex on the south side of Glenridge. The apartment was smaller, just 2 bedrooms, with a concrete parking lot instead of a yard. The children shared a room. Emily slept in a twin bed near the window. Christopher had a smaller bed against the opposite wall. Dennis hung a sheet down the middle of the room for privacy, but the children could hear each other breathing at night. And sometimes Emily would wake to find her little brother standing beside her bed, asking if Mommy was coming back. The town watched the Holloway family from a distance. Some people believed Dennis had nothing to do with Patricia's disappearance. They brought casseroles to the apartment. They volunteered to babysit. They shook Dennis's hand at church and told him they were praying for answers. Others were less certain. They noticed how quickly Dennis had moved on, how he never mentioned Patricia's name unless someone else brought it up first. They noticed how he started dating a woman named Linda Freeman less than a year after Patricia vanished. Linda worked as a secretary at the textile mill. She was 34 years old, divorced, no children. She had dark hair and wore bright red lipstick and drove a white Pontiac with a Jesus fish decal on the bumper. For those who have ever doubted someone you love, you understand the particular torture of living in that uncertainty. Emily and Christopher grew up in that space between knowing and not knowing. Emily became a quiet child, watchful, old beyond her years. She did well in school but had few friends. Teachers said she seemed anxious, always looking toward the classroom door as if expecting someone to walk through it. Christopher had nightmares. He wet the bed until he was 7 years old. The school counselor suggested therapy, but Dennis said the family could not afford it. The psychological weight settled over the apartment like a fog. Dennis rarely spoke about Patricia. When Emily asked questions, he would say, "Your mother left, that is all I know." When Christopher cried for her, Dennis would tell him to be strong, to stop acting like a baby. The children learned not to ask. They learned to carry their questions in silence. Small revelations emerged over the years, pieces of truth that did not fit the story Dennis told. Emily remembered things, fragments that would surface unexpectedly. She remembered waking up in the car that August morning, feeling hot, the sun beating through the windows. She remembered her mother's voice saying, "Stay here, do not move, I will be right back." She remembered waiting, Christopher beside her, both of them watching the road. She remembered the sun climbing higher. She remembered her brother crying. She remembered being so thirsty her tongue stuck to the roof of her mouth. She remembered climbing out of the car finally, when the heat became unbearable. She remembered walking, holding Christopher's hand, his small fingers slippery with sweat. She remembered no houses, no cars stopping, just the long road and the pine trees and the red dust coating their shoes. She remembered the deputy finding them, lifting Christopher into his arms. She remembered thinking her mother would be angry that they had not stayed in the car like she said. But as Emily grew older, the memory shifted. She began to understand that something about it did not make sense. Her mother had left them in a car on a 90-degree day. Her mother had not come back. These were not the actions of the woman Emily remembered, the mother who checked their seat belts 3 times before driving anywhere, who made them hold her hand in parking lots, who never let them out of her sight. When Emily was 11 years old, she drew a picture in art class. The assignment was to illustrate a memory. Emily drew a blue car sitting beside a road. 2 small figures stood next to the car. In the background, she drew a brown truck. The art teacher, a young woman named Sandra Mills, saw the drawing and felt something twist in her stomach. She knew the Holloway story. Everyone in Glenridge knew it. She asked Emily about the truck. Emily said she did not know why she had drawn it. She said she did not remember a truck. But something in her mind insisted it had been there. Dennis married Linda Freeman in the spring of 1982, 3 years after Patricia disappeared. The wedding was small, held in the chapel at Glenridge Methodist, just family and a few close friends. Emily was the flower girl. She wore a pink dress and walked down the aisle scattering white rose petals, her face expressionless. Christopher was the ring bearer. He dropped the rings halfway down the aisle and started crying. Linda picked them up, smiling, and ruffled his hair. The marriage changed things in the apartment. Linda moved in, bringing boxes of belongings that crowded the small space. She rearranged the furniture. She threw away Patricia's things, the few items Dennis had kept: a hairbrush, a bottle of perfume, a photo album. When Emily protested, Linda said it was time to move forward, time to let go of the past. Dennis said nothing. He stood in the kitchen, drinking a beer, watching his new wife dispose of his first wife's belongings as if they were trash. The relationship between Dennis and Linda deteriorated quickly. They argued constantly, their voices rising through the thin walls of the apartment. Emily would lie in her bed, listening, the sheet hanging between her and Christopher providing no real barrier to the sound. She heard Linda accuse Dennis of never caring about anyone but himself. She heard Dennis respond in a low, dangerous voice that made Emily pull her blanket up to her chin. She heard doors slamming, glass breaking once, Linda's car starting in the parking lot at midnight. Christopher drew pictures too, dark pictures that the school counselor found concerning. He drew a stick figure lying on the ground, red crayon surrounding it. When asked what the picture showed, Christopher said it was his mother. When asked why his mother was on the ground, Christopher said he did not know, he just felt like she should be there. The counselor called Dennis to come in for a meeting. Dennis said the boy had an overactive imagination. He said Christopher watched too much television. He said he would talk to him about drawing more appropriate things. Linda left in the fall of 1984. The divorce was quick and uncontested. She moved to Florida to live with her sister. She did not stay in touch with the children. Years later, when a private investigator hired by Emily tracked Linda down and asked what she remembered about her marriage to Dennis Holloway, Linda said only that there was something wrong with that man, something cold at his core. She said she used to wake in the night and find Dennis standing at the bedroom window, staring out at nothing, perfectly still. She said when she asked what he was doing, he would say, "Just thinking about the past." She said she never asked what specifically he meant because she was afraid of what he might answer. For those who have ever lived with unspoken knowledge, you understand how it grows heavier over time. Emily entered high school carrying the weight of her mother's absence and the suspicion that her father knew more than he claimed. She started keeping a journal, writing down everything she remembered about that August morning in 1979. She wrote down details she had not thought about in years. She wrote about how her father had been different before her mother disappeared, more present, more willing to smile. She wrote about how he changed afterward, becoming silent and distant, as if a part of him had left with Patricia. Christopher struggled more visibly. He got into fights at school. He was suspended twice in 8th grade. He started smoking at 14. By 16, he was drinking beer with older kids behind the grocery store. Dennis seemed not to notice or not to care. He worked long hours at the textile mill, now a floor manager, and came home exhausted. He sat in front of the television with a six-pack of Budweiser and fell asleep in his recliner most nights. The distance between him and his children widened into a chasm that no one attempted to bridge. Emily left for college in 1992, accepting a scholarship to the University of Georgia. She did not come home for Thanksgiving that first year. She made an excuse about needing to study for finals. The truth was she could not bear to sit across the table from her father and pretend everything was normal. Christopher joined the Army 2 years later, shipping out to basic training the week after his 18th birthday. He wrote Emily letters from boot camp. In one he said, "Do you ever think Dad did something to Mom? I think about it all the time. I dream about it." The separation from their father brought clarity. Distance provided perspective that proximity had obscured. Emily began researching her mother's case, requesting files through the Freedom of Information Act, reading old newspaper articles on microfiche in the library. She discovered inconsistencies in her father's statements that investigators had noted but never pursued. She found the neighbor's testimony about seeing the truck that morning. She found the forensic report on the Impala, noting that the driver's seat had been adjusted to a position consistent with someone taller than Patricia, someone approximately Dennis's height. She contacted the GBI in 1995. An agent named Robert Chen took her call. He listened as Emily explained what she remembered, what she suspected, what she believed had happened that morning 16 years earlier. Chen pulled the file. He read through it, noting the same inconsistencies Emily had found. He agreed the case deserved another look, but the evidence was old, witnesses had moved or died, memories had faded. Without something new, something concrete, there was little he could do. That something new came from an unexpected source. In the winter of 1998, a woman named Dorothy Kinsey walked into the Glenridge Police Department and asked to speak to someone about Patricia Holloway. Dorothy was 73 years old, the mother of Margaret Kinsey, the woman who had found Emily and Christopher on County Road 18 all those years ago. Dorothy was dying of lung cancer. She had something she needed to say before she left this world. Part 4. The revelation. Dorothy Kinsey sat in the interview room at the Glenridge Police Department on January 14, 1998, 19 years after Patricia Holloway vanished. She was thin, her skin paper-white, her voice raspy from the cancer eating through her lungs. She coughed into a handkerchief before she spoke. The detective across from her, a young man named Michael Torres who had been in elementary school when Patricia disappeared, turned on a tape recorder and placed it on the table between them. "I should have come forward years ago," Dorothy said, "but I was scared. My daughter Margaret was scared too. We did not know what to do, and after a while it seemed too late to say anything." Torres leaned forward. "What did you see, Mrs. Kinsey?" Dorothy cleared her throat. "The morning that woman vanished, I was at Margaret's house. She lived on that property on County Road 18 back then, before she moved into town. I was visiting for a few days, helping her with the new baby. Around 9 in the morning, I saw a brown pickup truck pull off the road near our property. A man got out. He opened the back door of a blue car that was parked there and lifted out 2 children, a little girl and a little boy. He set them down beside the car. He said something to them. I could not hear what. Then he got back in his truck and drove away." "Did you recognize the man?" Torres asked. "Not at the time," Dorothy said. "I had never seen him before. But I saw his picture in the newspaper later. It was the husband, Dennis Holloway." Torres felt his heartbeat accelerate. "Why did you not come forward then?" Dorothy looked down at her hands, twisted together in her lap. "I told Margaret what I saw. She said we should call the police." But then I started thinking about it. The man had not hurt those children. He had just left them there. Margaret said maybe there was a good reason. Maybe there was something we did not understand. And then the police found the children, and everyone was looking for the mother, and I started thinking maybe what I saw did not matter. But it did matter, Tor said quietly. I know that now, Dorothy said. I have known it for years, but once you wait a certain amount of time, it becomes harder to speak up. People ask why you did not say something sooner. They doubt you. And I doubted myself too. I thought maybe I remembered it wrong. Maybe it was not that morning. Maybe it was a different truck, a different man. But you do not doubt it now. Dorothy looked directly at Tor's, her eyes clear despite the pain etched into her face. I am dying, detective. I have made my peace with God, but I cannot go to my grave carrying this secret. That man left those babies beside the road in 90-degree heat. He left them there and drove away. And his wife was never seen again. Whatever happened to Patricia Holloway, Dennis knows about it. I would bet my soul on that. The case reopened officially on January 20th, 1998. The GBI assigned Agent Robert Chen, who had spoken with Emily 3 years earlier, to lead the investigation. Local police provided support. The old files were pulled from storage, dusted off, re-examined with fresh eyes and 2 decades of technological advancement. Chen interviewed Dorothy Kinsey again, this time with a prosecutor present. She repeated her story, consistent in every detail. Chen interviewed Margaret Kinsey, now 54 years old and living in Macon. Margaret confirmed that her mother had told her about seeing the man in the truck that morning, though Margaret herself had not witnessed it. She said she had encouraged her mother to come forward back then, but admitted she had not pushed hard. She said she regretted it every day. Chen contacted Emily Holloway, now 24 years old and working as a paralegal in Atlanta. She agreed to meet with him. They sat in a coffee shop near her apartment, and Emily told him everything she remembered. Chen listened, taking notes. He asked if Emily would be willing to testify if the case went to trial. Emily said yes without hesitation. Christopher Holloway was harder to locate. He had left the Army after 4 years and was living in Colorado, working construction. Chen reached him by phone. Christopher said he remembered almost nothing about the day his mother disappeared. He had been 3 years old, but he said he had always felt something was wrong. He said his father had always frightened him in ways he could not articulate. He said if Chen needed him to testify, he would come back to Georgia. The forensic evidence was re-examined. The white sandal found near Highway 41 was tested with techniques that had not existed in 1979. Soil samples from the sandal were analyzed and compared to soil from various locations around Glenridge. The results showed microscopic particles of limestone dust, consistent with soil found near an abandoned quarry 5 miles east of town. The quarry had been closed since 1975, the property fenced off, the water-filled pit dark and deep. Chen obtained a warrant to search the property on County Road 18, where Margaret Kinsey had lived in 1979. The current owners gave permission. A team of forensic specialists spent 3 days walking the land with ground-penetrating radar, looking for anything unusual beneath the surface. They found nothing related to Patricia Holloway, but they did find something interesting. Tire tracks preserved in hardened clay near where Dorothy said the truck had been parked. The impressions were old, partially overgrown but still visible. Photographs were taken, measurements were recorded. The pattern matched the tires used on Ford pickup trucks manufactured between 1975 and 1981. On March 3, 1998, Agent Chen went to Dennis Holloway's apartment and asked if he would be willing to come to the station to answer a few questions. Dennis, now 50 years old, balding, heavier than he had been in 1979, agreed. He drove himself to the Glenridge Police Department, parked his truck in the visitor lot, and walked inside. The interview lasted 4 hours. Chen and another agent, a woman named Sarah Vickers, sat across from Dennis in a small room with cinderblock walls painted beige. They reviewed the timeline of August 23, 1979, asking Dennis to go through it once more. Dennis repeated the story he had told countless times. He came home from work, ate breakfast, took a shower, went to sleep. He woke at noon to find Patricia and the children gone. Chen confronted him with Dorothy Kinsey's testimony. Dennis sat very still for a long moment, his face unreadable. Then he said Dorothy was mistaken. He said he had not driven out to County Road 18 that morning. He said he had no idea why Dorothy would say such a thing, unless she was confused or lying. Chen laid out photographs on the table. The tire tracks, the odometer readings from the Impala, the adjusted driver's seat, the white sandal with limestone dust. Dennis looked at each photograph, his expression never changing. He said the evidence proved nothing. He said investigators were trying to blame him for something he did not do, just like they had tried 19 years earlier. "Where is Patricia, Dennis?" Chen asked. "I do not know," Dennis said. His voice was flat, emotionless. "Did you hurt her?" "No." "Did you drive the children out to County Road 18 and leave them there?" "No." "Then why did Dorothy Kinsey see you do exactly that?" Dennis leaned back in his chair. He crossed his arms over his chest. "I want a lawyer," he said. The interview ended. Dennis was not arrested that day. There was not yet enough evidence to charge him, but Chen kept digging. He obtained records from Glenridge Textiles showing that Dennis had called in sick on August 23, 1979, the morning Patricia disappeared. Dennis had told investigators he worked the overnight shift and came home that morning, but the records showed his last shift had been the night of August 22nd. He had been scheduled off on August 23rd. He had lied about working that night. Chen tracked down former coworkers from the textile mill. Several remembered Dennis mentioning problems in his marriage. One man, retired and living in Florida, said Dennis had told him in the summer of 1979 that Margaret wanted to leave him, wanted to take the children and move back in with her parents. Dennis had been angry about it, the coworker said. He had said Patricia would regret it if she tried.